Folks, we are the Constitution Party of Tennessee. We have a great candidate for the highest office. It is Dr. Shaun Crowell. Shaun, please welcome Dr. Shaun Crowell. Shaun, before you take the microphone here, I know you may be somewhat. I know you're somewhat familiar with the Tennessee 8th District Tea Party Coalition. We're a member. We're a coalition of 10 county Tea Party groups in primarily West Tennessee. We have a PAC. We don't have a rich PAC, but we have a PAC. And this PAC money is hard to get. It takes a unanimous vote of the members of this coalition to get funds from those PAC. You got a unanimous vote from the PAC. It's $4,000 for your campaign.
I need to get in contact with my treasurer about that little donation. Thank you. That's a great donation, actually. I appreciate that. You know, it is an honor to be standing here before such a distinguished audience as yourself, because I view you guys as true patriots and true Americans. And you know, you got up on a Saturday morning and you sacrificed to come out and be a part of this process. And I just thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here and being one of the people that I look up to. And we've already had some great speakers this morning that I have the utmost respect for, and I know we have some great speakers lined up later on. It was 50 years ago that an up-and-coming statesman gave a powerful speech before a large audience. And he spoke of a nation that was bound by its Constitution and bound by liberty, and it had a hope because it had the Bill of Rights. And that's what he was talking about. And he was a very conservative man. He was talking about our founding fathers and how he had a high regard for them. He had this speech that he pulled out, and he called it a time for choosing. And when he spoke, his message resonated with his listeners. You see, he had been a lifelong Democrat in the Democrat Party in the 1940s and 1950s. But he knew that the Democrat Party was changing. It wasn't quite the Democratic Party that he thought it was. And he joined the Republican Party in the early 1960s because they were constitutional, because they were conservative, and he liked that. He was asked a little bit of time later by a reporter why he had left the Democrat Party. His response was phenomenal. He said, "I did not leave the Democratic Party, they left me." You may know who I'm speaking about. His name is Ronald Reagan. He spoke at the Republican National Convention in 1964. I too agree with the late president, because I look at myself as being very much like that. I've been conservative all my life and have voted Republican and thought that the Republicans were constitutional and conservative. But then I took a look deeply at the party that I loved and had respect for, and I felt like that they had betrayed me, as many of you have felt. And if a reporter were to come up to me today and ask, "Why did you leave the Republican Party?" you know what I'd say? I'd say what Reagan did. I'd say, I didn't leave the Republican Party, they left me. And more importantly, they left the Constitution. And this is why I have joined the Constitution Party, which I know is the only conservative party left in the state of Tennessee. Now, I know there's maybe a few that are watching on video, on the internet later on, or even out in the crowd that are Republicans. And that you're just not decisive. You haven't made the decision to join the Constitution Party. And that little statement that I said seems so arrogant, to say that we're the only conservative party left in the state. But I've got facts. I've got 3 people who I've looked at and who many of you have voted for in the past. How about Lamar Alexander? How about Bob Corker? We have 2 U.S. senators, Republican, conservative, supposedly constitutional. Yet we have a very openly and honestly, liberal president. I don't think I've ever heard Barack Obama say he was moderate, and I certainly haven't heard him say he was conservative. And you would think that a conservative would have a little bit of a difference of opinion with a liberal president, right? But these two U.S. senators have agreed with Barack Obama over 60% of the time when they have represented us as Tennesseans in Washington, D.C. Folks, at least Obama's honest about it. These guys aren't. And then they've got a good friend who lives in Nashville, Tennessee, who's our governor. His name's Bill Haslam. And Mr. Haslam, everything that Washington institutes in the states, what does Mr. Haslam do? All right, let's do it. I can just hear the conversation now. I can hear President calling up to Nashville and going, Governor, I'm going to do a bad impersonation of Barack Obama. Governor, I hear that we need higher standards. Is what we've been talking about in Washington for our children in the schools, and I'd like for you to put Common Core into the public schools. Can you do that for me? And I see Mr. Haslam right now. Oh yes, Mr. President, I'd love to do that. And then I can hear another conversation later on. Governor, I want to institute my health care plan in the state of Tennessee, Obamacare. Can you do that for me? Oh yes, sir, Mr. President, I'd love to do that for you. And then I can hear even a third conversation. Governor, I've heard that the senators in the state of Tennessee are putting together a bill to arrest federal officers who try to push gun control in your state. Can you fight that for me? I can see what Mr. Haslam would say right now. Oh yes, Mr. President, I'll do that. I'll do that for you. You know how I can picture that? Because that's what he's done. Right. Every time that Bill Haslam says yes to this president, then you and I have to deal with the mess, do we not? But we have hope because we have a strong law, and that law is called the Constitution of the United States. That law is called the State Constitution of Tennessee. That all power is inherent in the people is what Article 1, Section 1 of our state constitution says. It's you and I, guys, that have the power. It's not the politicians. And we also have a strong party now called the Constitution Party that the people of this state can rally behind and get excited about because now they have a true conservative choice and voice. And today you and I are a part of that history as we endeavor on this journey to educate the citizens of the state of Tennessee on our party. What makes this party so great are you guys. It's you, the people that are in this room. But what's even greater than you is the principles that we stand on and that we hold to. Because without principle, we'll fall, won't we? You've heard the old proverb, I'm going to mess it up already, but if you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything. And that's very true. You know what makes this party so great that I love is that our leadership in this party holds to the Constitution every single time. Let me repeat that again. Our leadership holds to the Constitution every single time. Other political parties cannot say that. And unlike Republicans and Democrats, we thoroughly vet our candidates before allowing them the hallowed title of being labeled a Constitution Party candidate. And we love to educate our membership as well. Just like today, we're going to be talking about the amendments later on. That's what we're about. We're about allowing the electorate to know what you're really voting on and who you're really voting on. You see, our party has an expectation of doing what is right, not what is politically correct. We work hard in this party because we realize what is at stake. It is our children and our grandchildren's future. Now, some people start talking about the mess. We like to get around Tea Party meetings. We talk about the mess all the time. Constitution Party meetings in the counties, we get together and we talk about the mess. And then you start asking a Republican about this mess. Who started this mess, you say? You know what a Republican says? They point at the Democrats, do they not? Then you look at the Democrats and you ask a Democrat, well, who started the mess? And they say, well, it's the Republicans. But if you ask a constitutionalist, then they will tell you the truth that both parties are responsible for this mess that we are in, and that no party is working towards a viable solution. Now, as many of you know, I'm a veterinarian by training, and I own a small business outside of Nashville in Spring Hill, Tennessee. I've been owning it for 5 years, and we've grown every year, and I thank God every day for that, because we started up in the Great Recession, and it wasn't easy. It's been many a hard day. But as I've grown, I've added more and more employees, and I've got this one young gentleman who's in high school. His name's Dylan, and he's a kennel assistant. And kennel assistant, for those of you that don't know the veterinary world, what that person does is basically cleans our hospital and cleans up after the pets. And so you would get these big dogs in all the time, and they come back, and Dylan takes them back and puts them back in their big cage. We call that a run. And, you know, as dogs do, they bark, they carry on, they get excited because mom and dad's not around, and they see somebody they don't know. And they also make messes and have bowel movements from time to time. And Dylan goes in there and scoops it up and then mops up the residue and gets it good and clean. So one day I'm exiting an exam room. It's towards the end of the day. I'm leaving my last patient for the day, and I step out of the exam room and step out back into the hospital and walking back to the back. And I noticed something real interesting that I usually didn't see and didn't experience. It was this squish, squish, squish sound as I'm going across the floor. And about the same time I look down, and I'm making an imprint in my concrete floor on top of it. I'm thinking, that's really odd. And about the same time I also notice a funny odor. And you know, I'm like, well, it smells like it's part bleach and part Fabuloso, which I don't know if you've ever used Fabuloso, but it's fabulous. And then the other part of that smell was not so Fabuloso. So I catch Dylan about that time, and I'm like, Dylan, did you change out the mop bucket water from this morning after you cleaned up after that dog? No, sir, he replied. And I thought to myself, well, that's where the problem's coming in, isn't it? And you say to yourself, what does that have to do with politics? Well, I think it has a lot to do with politics, and I'll tell you why. Because Republicans and Democrats do this continuously, do they not? They tell us that they're cleaning up the mess, while in reality, they're only smearing it around, making it larger, right? And then what do? They try to cover it up with something that smells good. Our current governor has made a mess of this state. When he took office 4 years ago, 40% of our state budget came from the federal government. And now today in 2014, 50% of our state budget funding comes from the federal government. In 4 years of his leadership, we have increased our dependency upon federal government funding 10%. No other governor in the history of this state has increased our dependency on federal government funding more than Mr. Haslam. If we give him 4 more years, then we can be assured that this state will be fully controlled by the federal government. We can't afford to do that. Now, late last year, there was a senior high school student from Knoxville, Tennessee, that stood before the Knox County Board of Education. And he was going to talk to the board members about the dangers of Common Core. His eloquent and articulate 5-minute speech produced a viral internet video sensation that has over 2 million hits on YouTube. His name is Ethan Young, and in his speech, he masterfully unveiled the history and money behind Common Core, and then proceeded to reveal its attack against teachers and students. He points out that an industrial-born model of educating our students is a, quote, one-size-fits-all mentality, end quote. I agree with you, Mr. Young. I think that your thought process on this is very, very wise for your young age, and I'm very impressed. Because the heart of Common Core is to destroy individual thought and competition while preparing the future of this nation and its work environment, and workers that don't ask questions and that don't take initiative. You know, I see in my small business in Tennessee, in Spring Hill, Tennessee, a problem with a lot of the youth already, even before Common Core has been implemented, because they come into my business and, you know, I don't see them perceiving their environment as well as they need to understanding what we do and how we do it, and then to go and implement what they need to do, to take initiative in the workplace. I have to tell them, and it's not all of my employees, but I have to tell a lot of them to put one foot in front of another in order to do a certain task, because they can't think for themselves. And Common Core is only going to exacerbate this thought process. So I have a question for you, Mr. Haslam. How can a teacher be an effective educator when they're trying to prepare their students for one big test at the end of the year? And that one big test makes their livelihoods as teachers completely dependent upon that test, and their bonuses completely dependent upon that test, and the teacher's worth to that school and to their community completely dependent upon that test. How in the world can they be effective educators? Teaching to the test is a flawed thought process that will end up frustrating our teachers, our superintendents, our principals, our parents, and our children. The end product will be a future generation of mediocre adults who cannot think for themselves. As your next governor, I will get rid of Common Core in our state. How will I do this? I will cut the head off the snake by not taking grant money called Race to the Top from Mr. Obama. Now recently, the governor sent me a palm card in the mail right before the primary. And it stated that he had created over 100,000 jobs in the state of Tennessee. So a few weeks later, I was reading on the internet from rightwingnews.com. And they validated this. They said that about 170,000 new jobs have been created in Tennessee. Well, what was interesting is where those new jobs were created at and who took those new jobs. So I kept reading the article down further, and the majority of those new jobs in Tennessee came from a certain sect of our population who's new to the state, called immigrants, with the majority of them being illegal. And that's what our governor claims as a win for the state of Tennessee. I don't agree, Mr. Haslam. I think you're wrong on that. You know, around where I live in Nashville, Williamson County, it is the wealthiest county of the state. And so we are back in a boom. People are building houses, businesses are building. So the economy does look pretty strong there. But you know, I have proof that the rest of Tennessee is not doing as well as Williamson County, because I drive all across the state when I'm campaigning, from west to middle to east. And I used to live in a little rural community, Camden, Tennessee, that probably many of you know about. And I was there not too long ago campaigning at the Benton County Tea Party. And you know what I saw? I haven't been there in 7 years. We haven't lived there in 7 years. And I saw the same factories that were closed 7 years ago still closed. And I saw the same retail spaces that were boarded up 7 years ago still boarded up. And I think to myself, if these 170,000 new jobs, they're certainly not in Camden, Tennessee. And I talked to some of the people who are hopeless and destitute, and they say to me, there's no good jobs left anymore, only Walmart is hiring. I shake my head and wonder, when will we, the people, wake up and stop the madness of empowering the two-party system that only smears the mess on the floor? When 27 states were taking the federal government to task on the constitutionality of Obamacare in 2011, you would think that the state of Tennessee, being a very conservative state that we are, would have been one of those 27, wouldn't you? But you would be wrong. Because our Attorney General never joined the lawsuit, and nor did the Governor, Bill Haslam, at the time tell the Attorney General to join that lawsuit. Tennessee was nowhere to be found on the list, and Mr. Haslam has now allowed Obamacare to breach our borders and consume our citizens in its socialistic endeavor to destroy our healthcare system without even a fight. Now in 2009, Bill Haslam was mayor of Knoxville. And he joined Mr. Bloomberg's group out of New York, Mayors Against Illegal Guns. I don't know if y'all read the Second Amendment recently, but it says the right to keep and bear arms is for the citizens and shall not be infringed. Did y'all read anything about illegal guns in that? Did our founders put that in, that there were some guns that could be illegal? I guess Mr. Haslam thinks that some guns could be illegal, but he decided to run for governor the next year, and he realized that being in this group was not politically expedient. So he dropped out of the group, and then he joined the NRA. Now that same year, Mr. Haslam went on the campaign trail and went across the state, and the Tennessee Firearms Association cornered him, and they asked him if a bill was put on his desk, a constitutional carry bill, would he sign it? And he said, yes, I think it's a good idea. Now, we're 4 years into his leadership. Do we have constitutional carry in the state of Tennessee?
No.
No, we don't. And Mr. Haslam hasn't made a point to try to push the envelope to get it either. And it would be something if, we were the only state that wanted constitutional carry, trying to break the string of not going by the Second Amendment. I understand if we were the first state to ever institute that, but there's actually 30 states in the United States who have constitutional carry, but not Tennessee. And we're a conservative state. Incredible. As your next governor, I'm going to make you a promise today. You put constitutional carry bill on my desk, I will sign it into law. Now, a lot of people think that a third party won't make it. But I will say to you that a third party won't make it because you won't let it. I think Jesus said it best when he says, "O ye of little faith." David killed Goliath. And I tell everybody around the state running for governor, this is a David versus Goliath thing. And they're like, yeah, I agree. Bill Haslam's a billionaire. That's an uphill battle. And I'm like, do you remember who won? Just remember that. Faith, by definition, is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not yet seen. That's what Hebrews says in the Bible. And I think that's an incredible definition, because that's where we're at right now, today. We're hoping for things we don't see yet, but we know they'll be there. Republican voters, about 6 years ago, said something phenomenal that I'll never forget, because they were voting for president at the time, and it was Barack Obama and John McCain. And you know what they started? And I know you've heard it too. They said, vote for the lesser of two evils. Now my question to you, especially if you're a born-again Christian, I want you to listen to me closely. Why are you voting for evil? You shouldn't be. I hear also, 4 years after that, in 2012, I heard when we were voting for president, don't split the vote. Don't split the vote. Well, I know some of you probably can tell me what the Constitution Party candidate got and what the Libertarian Party candidate got, but they were very, very small percentages in the Green Party and so on. So the vote really wasn't split, was it, in 2012? But guess who won? Republicans. Guess who won, Republicans? I'm talking to Republican voters now. Who won? It was the Democrat, right? The vote was never split, but yet the Democrat won. So that little philosophy of yours doesn't work either. I think back to 2008 again, and I think, well, at least the Democrat voters were excited about their candidate for president. The Republicans, most of you guys, if you voted for John McCain, you hung your head and held your nose. But in closing, I want to say something. I've said a lot of words. A lot of our speakers have come up and said a lot of words, but we really need action and not words. We need warm-blooded, God-fearing Tennesseans to once again volunteer to lead this state and nation back to greatness. It takes all of us uniting, both liberal and conservative, believe it or not, behind this one common document that gives us the freedom to be here today. This one document that is so sacred to the sovereignty of our nation and state, that men have fought and bled and died to defend the freedoms that it espouses. That document's the Constitution. And that Constitution, whether you're a liberal or you're conservative, is a rally cry for the people. Just like back in Texas, the Republic of Texas early days, they said, Sam Houston and his army said, remember the Alamo. Remember the Constitution. Don't forget it. I am happy to report that later on in the day, when I was working with Dylan, I told him, I said, Dylan, I want you to go change that mop bucket water out. And I want you to remop the floors and make it smell better and clean it up. And if I'm elected as your next governor, I pledge that I will do everything in my power to see that the mess is cleaned up in Nashville off of our state capitol floor, and that Tennessee smells better and is open for business again. Thank you.